voice from the heart of the city. And now, on demand 24/7 on the CHFI website. This is the soundtrack to accompany a crowd. And I'm Don Jackson, around the world on the internet. If you've got an iPod or an MP3 player, put this podcast onto it, and then go for a walk in a crowd and turn it on. Go ahead, pause it right here. I'll wait. Okay, even if you're at your computer, I want you to imagine yourself in a sea of faces. I think you will find a somewhat different perspective while out getting lost in a crowd. With Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. David Gray in Babylon and Gerry Rafferty on Baker Street. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Without love, this world would be a rather desolate place. And yet people live without love every day. The lonely walk among us. And you might never know the pain they're feeling unless they suddenly were to break down in front of you. The world can be a very lonely place, even though it teems with life. And the loneliest place of all, it seems, is in a crowd of strangers. Some have said they've never felt so all alone than when they were walking through a throng of people who seemed oblivious to their existence. They stare right through you, as if you're not even there. I've heard people say that they know what it would feel like to be invisible, because they can spend their hours being pushed and shoved without an apologetic word. If words are exchanged, they're said without eye contact. Bodies brush one another in crowded doorways and recoil as if they've rubbed up against something unpleasant. Whether you are loved by one person or by many, we each experience a little of this loneliness every day of our lives. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Paul Simon, still crazy after all these years, and Vanessa Carlton on a journey of 1,000 miles. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Vanessa Carlton was singing about falling into the sky in that song. Consider this. If you think it's only crowded down here on Earth. Rachel L. Carson, from The Sea Around Us, published by Oxford, wrote, thousands of meters above the Earth, the air is crowded with living creatures swirling along on the high winds. Discovery of this rich aerial plankton had to wait until man himself had found the means to make physical invasion of these regions with special nets and traps. Scientists have collected from the upper atmosphere many of the forms that inhabit oceanic islands. Spiders, whose almost invariable presence on these islands is a fascinating problem, have been captured nearly 5 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Airmen have passed through spiders' parachutes at heights of 3 to 5 kilometers. Seeds have been collected at altitudes up to 1.5 kilometers. No less than the water, the winds and air currents play their part in bringing inhabitants to remote islands. Unquote. In the current issue of National Geographic magazine, there is an article about the redwoods with absolutely stunning photography. To give you an example of their size, some are as tall as a Saturn rocket. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Vanessa Williams with The Colors of the Wind. Josh Groban and You Raise Me Up and Elton John's Rocketman. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Sometimes we need to find a way to escape a crowd. Few of us have the option that was available to Elton John's Rocketman, but there are still many uncrowded spaces here on Earth. We're now in the middle of a secluded redwood forest on the West Coast. Savor the silence for just a moment. There's a trout stream through the underbrush. Robert Traver, from Anatomy of a Fisherman, published by McGraw-Hill, wrote, I fish because I love to. Because I love the environs where trout are found, which are invariably beautiful, and hate the environs where crowds of people are found, which are invariably ugly. Because of all the television commercials, cocktail parties, and assorted social posturing, I escape. Because in a world where most men seem to spend their lives doing things they hate, my fishing is at once an endless source of delight and an act of small rebellion. Because trout do not lie or cheat and cannot be bought or bribed or impressed by power. Because I suspect that men are going along this way for the last time, and I, for one, don't want to waste the trip. Because, mercifully, there are no telephones on trout waters. Because only in the woods can I find solitude without loneliness. And finally, not because I regard fishing as being so terribly important, but because I suspect that so many of the other concerns of men are equally unimportant and not nearly so much fun. Robert Traver, from Anatomy of a Fisherman, published by McGraw-Hill. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Simply read like a fish on the line in Mellow My Mind, and the Doobie Brothers and Catfish are jumping in black water. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Peg Bracken, from the I Hate to Cook Almanac, published by Harcourt Brace Jovanovich, wrote, there are two good reasons for doing something fast. Because life is crowding in hard. And if the thing isn't done fast, it won't be done at all, or because doing it isn't half as rewarding as doing something else. Therefore, iron fast, or not at all, so you can paint slow. Shop fast, so you can sew slow. Cook fast, so you can read slow. Or spend time with a child before it disappears into an adult. Unquote. A crowd offers anonymity of sorts. People might be tempted to try something they might otherwise never consider alone. This was a feature from The Better Way some years back, and I quote, "When someone is convinced that things can't be done, he will cling to that conviction in the face of the most obvious contradiction. When Robert Fulton gave the first public demonstration of his steamboat, one of those can't-be-done fellows stood in the crowd along the shore repeating, 'He can't start her.' Suddenly, there was a belch of steam, and the boat began to move. Startled, the man stared for a moment and then began to chant, 'He can't stop her.'" Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there's your Tuesday afternoon all planned out. The Moody Blues and Bruce Hornsby in the Mandolin Rain. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Sometimes we look forward to getting lost in a crowd. Ray Bradbury in California wrote, "Half the fun of travel is the aesthetic of lostness. Not being able to put Piccadilly together with Regent Street to distant Charing Cross. That is deliciousness. To go down the Spanish Steps in Rome and vanish. To go out in Paris midnight crowds and wonder why you love it so, as texture after texture drifts by, and you wish you could walk forever." Ray Bradbury, writing in California. Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. So how was your time in the crowd today? I'll bet you had a smile on your face as others passed by. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.